The cold iron of the balcony railing bit into Elena's palms, but it was nothing compared to the predatory chill radiating from the shadow standing 3 inches behind her. In the heart of the Valeska estate, a sprawling Gothic fortress hidden by the perpetual mists of the Black Mountains, silence wasn't just a lack of sound, it was a physical weight. Below, the aristocrats of the night moved like silken ghosts, their eyes gleaming with a hunger that centuries of etiquette couldn't mask. But the man behind her didn't need to hide it. He was the hunger. He was the sovereign. "You aren't trembling, Elena," a voice like crushed velvet and jagged flint murmured. Elena Crane didn't turn. She watched her own reflection in the darkened glass of the ballroom doors. A woman in a crimson silk dress that looked too much like a fresh wound against her pale skin. Should I be Silas? Silas Valeska, the king of the unbroken line, stepped into the sliver of moonlight. He didn't walk, he displaced the air. He was a monument to frozen time, wearing a suit that cost more than the village Elena had been stolen from, his silver-white hair contrasting sharply with eyes the color of an approaching storm. For 500 years he had ruled this hidden world with a heart of obsidian, never choosing a consort, never offering the mark. To the others he was a god. To Elena he was the man who had claimed her as a curiosity. A human girl with the audacity to look him in the eye and tell him his wine tasted like copper and loneliness. "Most would have collapsed by now," Silas whispered, his breath barely stirring the stray hairs at the nape of her neck. He leaned closer, the scent of cedarwood and ancient rain enveloping her. "Most would be begging for their lives. Or for the bite." Elena finally turned, her chest heaving as she met that terrifying, electrified gaze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Not with the rhythm of fear, but with the frantic drumbeat of a soul recognizing its predator. She knew the legends. The eternal bite wasn't just a feeding. It was a soul tether, a metaphysical chain that bound 2 people across the fabric of time. To receive it was to become his forever, a part of a dark divinity. To refuse it was to eventually wither and die while he remained unchanged. "I'm not most, Silas," she snapped, her voice trembling only slightly. "And I don't beg. If you want my blood, take it. If you want my soul, you'll have to earn it." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face, revealing the lethal edges of teeth that had ended empires. He reached out, his thumb tracing the pulsing vein in her throat with agonizing slowness. The tension between them snapped like a live wire. In that moment the air felt thick enough to drown in. "I don't want your blood, Elena Crane," he rasped, his eyes darkening until the irises disappeared. "I want the one thing I was told I could never have. I want the heartbeat that refuses to stop for me." Hello to everyone tuning in. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here for this journey into the shadows. We are diving deep into a world of ancient secrets and dangerous desires today. Before we go any further into the dark corridors of the Valeska estate, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far our community reaches. And if you're finding yourself caught in the tension between Elena and Silas already, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It truly helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss a chapter of these emotional sagas. Are you doing well today? I hope you're ready because things are about to get much more intense. Silas's hand dropped, but the heat of his touch lingered on her skin like a brand. Behind them, the heavy oak doors of the balcony creaked open. A tall, gaunt man with eyes like yellowed parchment, Victor Sterling, the king's most trusted advisor and most cynical critic, stepped out. "Sire," Victor said, his voice a dry rattle. "The Council of the 5 Houses is assembled. They are impatient. They wish to discuss the succession. And the rumors of your human guest have reached the ears of House Moretti." Silas didn't look back. His gaze remained locked on Elena, a silent promise or a silent threat smoldering between them. Elena felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She was a spark in a room full of gunpowder. She was the only mortal in a court of monsters, and she was the only thing the king looked at with something resembling hunger. "Let them wait," Silas said coldly. "They won't wait forever, sire," Victor warned, his eyes flicking to Elena with unmistakable disdain. "And neither will the law of the bloodline. If a king does not choose a mate by the great eclipse, the throne is forfeit. You have 3 nights." Silas leaned in one last time, his lips brushing the shell of Elena's ear. 3 nights to decide if you are a fleeting shadow, Elena, or my eternity. He turned and vanished into the ballroom, leaving Elena alone in the freezing mist. As she looked down at the courtyard, she saw a black carriage emblazoned with the crest of House Moretti pulling into the gates. The shadows were closing in, and the mystery of Silas's sudden obsession with her felt less like a romance and more like a death sentence. Why had he chosen her? And what was the secret Silas was hiding behind his icy exterior? A secret that the other houses were willing to kill for. The weight of the velvet curtains in Elena's chambers felt like the walls of a gilded cage. As she paced the length of the room, all dark mahogany and silk the color of dried blood, she caught her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She looked like a stranger. Elena Crane, the girl who had spent her life navigating the rugged, forgotten corners of the countryside, was now draped in the finery of a world that viewed her as little more than a porcelain doll with a pulse. But Elena wasn't porcelain. Her deepest fear wasn't the monsters in the ballroom. It was the fear of being forgotten, of her life flickering out like a candle in the wind without ever having truly mattered. Growing up as the daughter of a village healer, she had seen death, the quiet, hollow kind that left no trace. She craved a legacy, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished. It was that drive that had led her to the Valeska estate in the first place, seeking answers about her mother's mysterious disappearance years ago. A trail that had gone cold until she found a signet ring bearing the Valeska crest in her mother's old jewelry box. She was interrupted by a soft knock. A young woman, appearing no older than Elena but possessing a gaze that felt ancient, stepped inside. This was Clara Thorne, her name a blend of a classic screen star and a noir detective's flame. Clara was a daywalker servant, a half-vampire who occupied the lowest rung of the estate's hierarchy. "The king has sent this for you," Clara whispered, holding out a small ornate vial filled with a shimmering violet liquid. "It's a tincture of mountain lavender and crushed star stones. For the nerves." "My nerves are fine, Clara," Elena said, though her hands still hummed with the phantom sensation of Silas's touch. "What I need are answers. Why is he so obsessed with this eclipse? And why me?" Clara's expression shifted, a flicker of genuine empathy crossing her face. Silas Valeska is a man who has lived through 5 centuries of betrayal. His brothers were slaughtered by rival houses, and his father was betrayed by his own consort. He built these walls not to keep people out but to keep his own heart from beating. He believes that to love is to provide a target for his enemies. She paused, her voice dropping to a low, urgent tone. "But the prophecy of the eternal bite is different. It says the king will only find his equal in a soul that has survived the fire of the mortal coil. He sees a strength in you, Elena, that he hasn't seen in 500 years of immortal posturing." Suddenly, the heavy doors to the suite were thrown open. A man with hair the color of bone and eyes like sharpened emeralds lounged in the doorway. This was Julian Vance, a name borrowed from a Golden Age lead and a gritty thriller antagonist. Julian was the head of House Vance, the Valeska's most vocal rivals, and a man who wore his cruelty like a tailored cloak. "So this is the little heartbeat causing all the stir," Julian drawled, his presence instantly souring the air. He walked toward Elena, circling her like a shark. "You're quite small for such a heavy destiny, aren't you? Tell me, does Silas tell you how many eternities he's watched burn to ash?" "He hasn't told me anything," Elena said, standing her ground, her chin tilted up defiantly. "And I don't recall inviting you into my room." Julian laughed, a cold, melodic sound. "I go where I please in this court. You should know, little bird, that Silas's interest in you isn't just about love. The eternal bite grants the king a power boost that would make him invincible against the council. He's using you as a battery, a mortal anchor to keep his throne." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Was she just a tool? A means to an end for a king who refused to step down? "You're lying," she said, though a seed of doubt began to take root. "Am I?" Julian leaned in, his voice a poisonous hiss. "Ask him about the Starlight Protocol. Ask him what happened to the last human he brought to the balcony. Or better yet, come to the gardens at midnight. I'll show you the graves he keeps hidden under the roses." As Julian vanished back into the shadows of the hallway, Clara grabbed Elena's arm. "Don't listen to him. He wants to isolate you. But Elena, you must be careful. Silas is a king first and a man second. He has secrets that even I am afraid to whisper." Elena looked out the window at the looming great eclipse, the moon already beginning to bite into the sun's territory. She felt the connection to Silas, that invisible thread, tighten. It wasn't just attraction, it was a gravity she couldn't escape. But was she falling into love, or into a trap designed by a man who had forgotten how to be human? The mystery is deepening and I can feel the tension rising. Do you think Silas is truly using Elena, or is Julian just trying to tear them apart? I want to hear your theories in the comments. If you're enjoying the suspense, make sure you've hit that like button. It really helps the story reach more people who love this kind of drama. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join our community so you don't miss the moment Silas makes his move. Elena spent the rest of the evening in a daze, the luxury of her surroundings now feeling like a shroud. She thought of her mother, of the signet ring, and of the way Silas looked at her, not as a king looking at a subject, but as a drowning man looking at a life raft. Deep in the bowels of the castle, in a room lined with ancient scrolls and jars of preserved history, Silas Valeska stood alone. He held a piece of parchment that was yellowed with age. It was a letter written in a hand that looked hauntingly similar to Elena's. "I am running out of time," he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking with a vulnerability he would never show the council. "If she finds out the truth before the bite, I won't just lose the throne. I'll lose the only reason I've stayed alive for 5 centuries." He looked up as the first sliver of the eclipse began, his eyes glowing with a desperate, haunted light. The foundations were set, the players were in place, and the secret that bound Elena's past to Silas's future was about to explode. The midnight air in the Valeska gardens didn't just carry the scent of roses. It carried the metallic tang of old blood and the heavy electric charge of the gathering eclipse. Elena moved through the labyrinth of hedges, her heart a frantic bird against her ribs. Julian's words had played on a loop in her mind, a battery, a mortal anchor. She needed to know if her mother's ring and Silas's sudden obsession were part of a beautiful fate or a calculated heist of her soul. She reached the center of the garden, a clearing dominated by a white marble fountain depicting a weeping goddess. But the water wasn't clear. It was stained a deep, bruised purple by the moonlight. "You actually came," a voice rasped. It wasn't Julian. Standing by the fountain was a woman Elena had seen only in the periphery of the ballroom. She was strikingly beautiful, with hair like liquid gold and eyes that held the coldness of a glacier. This was Evelyn Beaumont, a name combining a classic Hollywood starlet and a legendary silent film actor. Evelyn was the high priestess of House Moretti and Silas's former betrothed, a woman whose grace masked a lethal jealousy. "Where is Julian?" Elena demanded, stepping back as the shadows around the fountain seemed to lengthen and crawl toward her feet. "Julian is a gossip. I am a solution," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She stepped forward, the silk of her gown hissing against the grass. "You think you're special, Elena? You think Silas looks at you and sees a soulmate? He looks at you and sees a clock that's about to strike midnight. He needs the eternal bite to seal his power before the council strips him of his crown. He's not falling in love, he's filing a claim." "I don't believe you," Elena whispered, though her mind flashed to the way Silas had watched the eclipse with such desperation. "Then believe your own eyes." Evelyn tossed a heavy leather-bound journal onto the marble rim of the fountain. "Read the entry from 20 years ago. The night a human woman named Rose Crane entered this estate and never left." Elena's breath hitched. Rose. Her mother's name. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the book, but before she could touch it, the air temperature plummeted. The roses around them began to wither and blacken in seconds. A blur of motion, faster than the human eye could track, slammed into the clearing. Silas stood between Elena and Evelyn, his presence a wall of terrifying power. His eyes were no longer the color of a storm. They were pits of burning, incandescent white. "Step away from her, Evelyn," Silas growled, the sound vibrating in the very ground beneath Elena's boots. "Or what, Silas? You'll kill the only person who knows where the second half of the blood seal is hidden." Evelyn laughed, though she backed away. "She's finding out the truth. You're using her just like you used her mother. You need the Crane bloodline to bridge the gap between the living and the eternal. Tell her, Silas. Tell her that the eternal bite doesn't just bind her to you. It consumes her life force to fuel your immortality for another 1,000 years." The revelation hit Elena like a physical strike to the chest. The consequences weren't just political, they were biological. To be his forever was to be his battery. Is it true? Elena gasped, looking at the man she had begun to feel an impossible pull toward. Silas. Look at me. Is my mother dead because of you? Am I just a sacrifice for your throne? Silas turned to her, the white fire in his eyes fading to a look of profound, agonizing guilt. He reached out a hand but she flinched away. That flinch seemed to hurt him more than any silver blade could. Elena, it's not what you think. Is she dead? Elena screamed. Before he could answer, the ground shook. From the shadows of the hedges, 6 masked figures, assassins from the rival house Vance, leapt into the clearing, their blades coated in a shimmering green toxin. They weren't there for the king. They were there for the girl. If Elena died, Silas's claim to the throne died with her. Protect the girl. Silas roared, shifting into a whirlwind of lethal elegance as he intercepted the first 3 attackers. But the 4th assassin bypassed him, lunging at Elena with a jagged dagger. Elena, fueled by a sudden primal surge of survival, didn't scream. She grabbed a heavy stone gargoyle from the fountain's edge and swung with everything she had. The impact sent the assassin reeling, but a second one was already behind her. Just as the blade was inches from her throat, a hand caught the metal. Silas had moved with impossible speed, the silver blade slicing deep into his palm. His blood, thick and glowing with a faint, ethereal light, dripped onto Elena's dress. He didn't wince. He snapped the assassin's neck with a single twist and turned to Elena, his face splattered with blood, his expression one of raw, terrifying protectiveness. Run, he hissed. Clara is waiting at the north gate. Go. I'm not leaving without the truth. Elena shouted over the clash of steel. The truth is in the crypts beneath the west tower. Silas yelled as he parried 2 more blades. Go, Elena. If they take you, the world ends. Elena grabbed the journal Evelyn had dropped and bolted into the darkness. Behind her, she heard the sounds of a king fighting a war on 2 fronts, against his enemies and against his own heart. Oh my God, I am shaking. The betrayal, the secrets, the combat, it's all happening at once. Do you think Silas is truly the villain Elena's mother warned her about, or is he a victim of the same prophecy? I need you to go to the comments right now and tell me, Team Silas or Team Elena's safety? If you're on the edge of your seat like I am, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. We are only just getting started and the twists are going to get even bigger. Stay tuned, because Elena is about to discover what really happened to her mother in the West Tower. Elena ran until her lungs burned like she was inhaling glass. She reached the north gate but Clara wasn't there. Instead, the gate was hanging off its hinges and the guards lay unconscious. She looked back at the castle, the great eclipse now obscuring half the sun. The sky was a bruised, sickly violet. She held her mother's journal to her chest. She had a choice. She could run into the woods and hope to escape the vampires forever, or she could go to the West Tower and face the ghosts of her past. She looked at the blood on her dress, Silas's blood. It was warm and despite everything, it hummed with a strange, comforting energy. He had bled for her. He had saved her life even after she had called him a monster. Elena didn't run for the forest. She turned and sprinted toward the West Tower. She was going to find the truth, even if it meant looking into the eyes of the man who might have destroyed her family. The inciting incident had been sparked. The war for the Valeska throne had begun, and Elena Crane was no longer a witness. She was the prize, the weapon, and the only hope for a king who had forgotten how to love. The air inside the West Tower didn't just feel cold. It felt ancient, thick with the weight of centuries-old secrets and the stale scent of incense and stone. Elena clutched the journal to her chest, her footsteps echoing against the damp spiral staircase. Every flickering torch she passed felt like a dying heartbeat. Silas's blood on her dress had dried into a dark rust-colored stain, but the area of skin beneath it still pulsed with a strange magnetic heat. She reached the heavy iron grate leading to the crypts. With a groan of protesting metal, she shoved it open. Below lay the Valeska lineage, rows of marble sarcophagi topped with stone effigies of kings and queens who looked more like warriors than royalty. At the far end, tucked away from the grand monuments of the great kings, stood a modest alcove. Elena's breath hitched. Resting there was a simple wooden casket and above it, a name carved into the stone that made her knees weak. Rose Crane, the bridge. She wasn't a sacrifice, Elena. Elena spun around. Silas stood at the entrance of the alcove. He looked weary, his silk shirt torn and his shoulder bleeding from a shallow cut, but his eyes had returned to that piercing, stormy gray. He didn't approach her. He stayed in the shadows as if respecting the invisible line she had drawn between them. Then what was she? Elena's voice cracked. My mother disappeared from our village when I was 7. I grew up thinking she'd abandoned me. And I find her here in a vampire's basement, labeled as a bridge? Silas stepped forward, the light of her lantern catching the sharp angles of his face. Your mother was a scholar of the old blood. She came here because the peace between humans and our kind was failing. She believed that the eternal bite wasn't a curse of consumption, but a gift of shared essence. She wanted to prove that a human and a vampire could exist in a true balanced symbiosis. A union that would stabilize the royal bloodline without the need for the constant predatory hunger that fuels the lesser houses. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming the small space. She wasn't my prisoner. She was my advisor. And my friend. She died protecting the secret of the blood seal from House Vance. She knew that if they gained control of the king's tether, they would turn our kind into a literal plague. Elena looked at the casket, then back at Silas. The raw honesty in his voice was a physical force. And Julian? He said you're using me as a battery. Julian sees the world through the lens of theft, Silas said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rasp. He was standing so close now she could feel the cold fire energy radiating from him. The eternal bite does draw from the mortal soul, yes. But it is a loop, Elena. The king gives his immortality, his strength and his protection. The consort gives her vitality, her warmth and her humanity. It is a fusion. But it only works if the heart is willing. If it's forced, it destroys both. He reached out, his fingers hovering just inches from her cheek. I brought you here because I saw her in you. The same fire. The same refusal to bow. But then, I realized I didn't want a bridge. I wanted you. The tension in the crypt snapped. Elena reached out and grabbed his hand, pulling it to her face. His skin was ice cold, but where it touched hers, sparks seemed to fly. The attraction she had been fighting, the undeniable pull the legends spoke of, roared to life. It was terrifying and exhilarating, a hunger that had nothing to do with blood. You're a monster, Silas Valeska, she whispered, her eyes searching his. I am, he admitted, his thumb tracing her lower lip. But I am a monster who has been waiting 500 years for a reason to stop being one. He leaned down and for a moment, Elena thought he was going to bite her. Instead, his lips met hers in a kiss that tasted of ancient starlight and desperate hope. It was a collision of two worlds. The fragile racing pulse of the mortal and the steady, eternal power of the king. In that moment, the fear of the eclipse, the threat of House Vance, and the ghosts of the crypt faded into the background. There was only the heat of him and the way her soul seemed to recognize his like a long-lost language. Is anyone else screaming right now? That kiss was centuries in the making. But we can't forget that Julian and Evelyn are still out there, and the great eclipse is reaching its peak. Do you think Elena can truly trust Silas's version of the story, or is she falling deeper into a trap? I want to hear your thoughts. Is their love worth the risk of her mortality? Type "worth it" or "run Elena" in the comments right now. And if you're loving this emotional roller coaster, please subscribe and join our community of story lovers. We're heading into the midpoint revelation next, and trust me, everything you think you know is about to change. They pulled apart, both breathless. Silas's eyes were dark with a mixture of passion and something that looked like terror. The council is moving, he said, his voice strained. They found a loophole in the ancient law. They don't just want to remove me, Elena. They've invited a pure-blood claimant from the eastern wastes. Someone who doesn't believe in bridges or balance. Who? Elena asked, clutching his hand. A man named Malachi. Silas spat the name. He believes humans are nothing but livestock. If he takes the throne, the veil between our worlds drops. Your people will be hunted for sport. Before Elena could respond, a frantic banging echoed from the top of the tower stairs. Clara Thorne burst into the crypt, her face bruised and her breathing ragged. Silas. They've breached the inner sanctum, she cried. But that's not the worst of it. Elena, the journal. Look at the last page. The one your mother didn't finish. Elena flipped to the back of the leather book. There, in faded ink, was a sketch of the Valeska signet ring. But it wasn't just a ring. The drawing showed 2 rings designed to lock together. The king's bite is only half the key, the note read. The consort must also hold the seal of the living. Without it, the eternal bite is a death sentence. Silas doesn't have the seal. I hid it where only my blood could find it. Elena looked at Silas. He looked genuinely shocked. I never knew. She told me the mark was enough. She was protecting you both, Clara said, looking toward the door as the sound of armored boots grew louder. But Julian found it. He didn't go to the gardens to kill you, Elena. He went to find the seal. And he's heading for the Great Hall right now to give it to Malachi. The rising tension had reached a boiling point. Elena realized that her love for Silas wasn't just a personal choice anymore. It was the only thing standing between the world and a bloodbath. But to stop Julian, she would have to step into the heart of the enemy's nest, armed only with the blood of a healer and the heart of a queen. The great hall of the Valeska estate was no longer a place of celebration. It had become a court of judgment. High above, the great eclipse had swallowed the sun almost entirely, casting a terrifying, unnatural twilight over the gathered nobles. The air hummed with the collective heartbeat of hundreds of vampires, a low-frequency vibration that made the marrow in Elena's bones ache. Silas led the way, his hand locked in hers. He walked with the heavy, measured pace of a man approaching his own execution. As they entered, the sea of velvet and lace parted. At the far end of the hall, standing upon the dais that belonged to the Valeska line, was Julian Vance. Beside him stood a figure that seemed to absorb the very light of the room, Malachi. He was gaunt, his skin the color of ash, with eyes that were entirely black, void of any human emotion. "You're late, Silas," Julian called out, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. In his hand he held a silver filigree object that pulsed with a warm, golden light, the seal of the living. "The council has already cast their stones. Your hesitation to mark a consort has been deemed a weakness of the blood. Malachi has offered a more robust future." "That seal doesn't belong to you, Julian," Silas said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that caused the nearest nobles to flinch. "And the throne is not a prize to be traded by thieves." Malachi stepped forward, his movements fluid and unsettling. "It is not a trade, King Valeska. It is a restoration. Your obsession with balance and bridges is a rot. We are predators. We do not negotiate with the food." He turned his void-like gaze toward Elena. "And this is the curiosity I've heard so much about? The daughter of the woman who thought she could tame the night." Elena felt the weight of Julian's gaze and the cold malice of Malachi, but she didn't look away. "My mother didn't try to tame the night. She tried to save it from people like you." Julian laughed, stepping down from the dais. "Your mother was a dreamer, Elena. But even she didn't tell you the whole truth. She didn't hide the seal because she was afraid for Silas. She hid it because she was afraid for you." He held the seal aloft. The golden light intensified, reacting to Elena's presence. The closer Julian got, the more the air around Elena began to shimmer. "The prophecy says the king will find his equal in a soul that survived the fire of the mortal coil," Julian whispered, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Everyone assumed that meant a human who was strong of heart. "But look at the seal, Silas. Look at how it calls to her." The golden light didn't just illuminate the room. It began to flow toward Elena in wispy, ethereal ribbons. Silas's grip on her hand tightened, his eyes widening in a mixture of realization and horror. "The Cranes weren't just healers, Silas," Julian sneered. "They were the keepers of the original royal bloodline, the one your ancestors overthrew 1,000 years ago. Your human girl isn't a bridge. She's the rightful heir to the very throne you're sitting on." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Elena felt the world tilt. Her mother's secrecy, the signet ring, the bridge. It wasn't about a human helping a vampire. It was about the hidden royalty of the living reclaiming their place alongside the dead. "Is it true?" Elena whispered, looking at Silas. Silas looked down at her, and for the first time he looked truly broken. "I suspected. I feared. If you knew who you were, you would never choose me. You would see me as the descendant of the men who stole your birthright." "The choice is simple now," Malachi interjected, his voice like dry leaves. "Elena Crane, take the seal. Reclaim your power. Order Silas Valeska to kneel, and we will usher in an age where the blood of the living and the dead flows in one glorious, unending river. Or stay with your king, and watch as we tear this estate to the ground. The revelation was a game-changer. The woman who had been a pawn in a vampire's game was suddenly the most powerful person in the room. The stakes weren't just about Silas's throne or Elena's life. They were about the fundamental hierarchy of their world. Choose, Elena, Julian pressured, holding the seal inches from her hand. Be a queen of the dawn or a corpse in the dark. Elena looked at the seal, then at Malachi's cold eyes, and finally at Silas. He didn't speak. He didn't plead. He simply stood there, his heart, the one he claimed was obsidian, exposed and vulnerable for her to see. He was ready to lose everything if it was what she desired. I am literally screaming. Elena is the rightful heir. This changes everything. The power dynamic has completely flipped. I have to know, what would you do? Would you take the power and the throne for yourself, or would you stay loyal to the man who saved you, even if his ancestors were the villains of your story? Tell me in the comments, take the throne, or stay with Silas. And guys, we are at the halfway point of this incredible saga. If you're not subscribed yet, you are missing out on the biggest twists in YouTube history. Hit that button and the like for more. Elena's hand hovered over the seal. The heat from it was intoxicating, promising a strength she had never known. But as her fingers brushed the silver filigree, she felt a flash of her mother's memory. Not a memory of power, but a memory of love. Her mother hadn't stayed at the estate to reclaim a throne. She had stayed because she believed in a world where no one had to be a predator or prey. Elena didn't grab the seal. Instead, she looked Malachi dead in the eye and did the one thing no one expected. I don't want a throne built on theft, she said, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. And I don't want a king who rules through fear. With a sudden violent movement, she shoved Julian back and grabbed Silas's hand, pulling him toward the back of the hall. Elena, what are you doing? Silas hissed as they retreated. Giving them exactly what they don't want, she whispered. The truth. But Malachi wasn't going to let them walk away. With a wave of his hand, the heavy doors of the great hall slammed shut. The great eclipse reached its totality, plunging the world into absolute freezing darkness. If you will not be a queen, Malachi's voice boomed through the shadows, then you will be a memory. The betrayal was complete. The revelation had shattered their foundation, and as the darkness took hold, Elena realized that the eternal love promised by the legends was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. The darkness of the total eclipse wasn't just the absence of light. It was a living, breathing weight that tasted of ozone and ancient ash. When the doors slammed shut, the vacuum of sound was instantly replaced by the terrifying screech of metal on stone. Elena felt Silas's hand ripped from hers by a force so violent it threw her against the cold marble floor. Silas, she screamed, her voice swallowed by the shadows. Elena, run to the... His voice was cut off by a sickening thud and the sound of masonry shattering. When a flicker of spectral blue torchlight finally returned, the great hall had been transformed into a nightmare. Malachi stood in the center, his hands raised, weaving threads of shadow that pinned Silas against the far wall. Massive spikes of obsidian had erupted from the floor, trapping the king in a cage of jagged stone. Silas fought like a cornered god, his fangs bared blood, the glowing royal gold of his line, streaming down his face as he tried to claw through the magical barrier. Look at your king now, Malachi hissed, his voice echoing from every corner of the room. A prisoner of the very darkness he tried to balance. Leave him alone. Elena scrambled to her feet, but she was intercepted. Julian Vance stepped from the gloom, the seal of the living now glowing with a sickly, corrupted green light. He had forced his own dark energy into the relic, twisting its purpose. The girl goes to the oubliette, Malachi commanded. And the king stays here to watch the sun die forever. By the time the moon moves, there will be nothing left of the Valeska legacy but dust. Before Elena could even draw a breath to scream again, Julian's hand clamped over her mouth. The world spun, and the smell of roses and cedarwood was replaced by the stench of stagnant water and rot. She was dragged down deeper than the crypts, deeper than the West Tower, into the Silence Hole. A lightless stone pit where the walls were etched with the desperate scratchings of those the council wanted forgotten. She was thrown into the cell, the heavy iron door clanging shut with a finality that felt like a coffin lid. Elena slumped against the damp wall, the silence pressing in on her ears. For the first time, the fearless girl from the village felt the crushing weight of hopelessness. She had no weapons, no magic, and the man she loved was being tortured because he chose her. She thought of her mother, Rose. Had she sat in the same darkness? Had she died thinking her sacrifice meant nothing? In the great hall, Silas's screams of rage had turned to a low, guttural moan of agony. Malachi wasn't just physically restraining him. He was using the eclipse to drain Silas's immortality, siphoning the Valeska power into himself. "She's gone, Silas," Malachi whispered, leaning close to the king's ear. "The heartbeat you loved so much has faded. Even now the cold is taking her. You gave your heart to Immortal, and now you will die like one." Silas's head fell forward. The light in his eyes, the storm that had burned for 5 centuries, flickered. He felt the tether, the invisible bond between him and Elena, fraying. It felt like a violin string being stretched to the point of snapping. If that connection broke, he knew he would slip into the true death, a void from which no vampire, king or otherwise, ever returned. Back in the pit, Elena huddled in the corner. Her fingers brushed the signet ring hanging from the chain around her neck. It felt ice cold. "I'm sorry, Silas," she whispered, tears finally breaking through. "I'm just a girl. I can't save the night." She felt a sudden sharp pain in her chest, a reflection of Silas's agony. The separation was a physical wound. She realized then that Julian was right about one thing. She was a battery. But she wasn't Silas's power source, he was hers. And he was dying. As the temperature in the cell dropped to freezing, Elena realized with a jolt of pure despair that the great eclipse wasn't moving. Malachi had used the seal to lock the celestial bodies in place. The darkness was permanent. The world was ending, and the eternal love she had begun to believe in was being smothered in the cradle of a dungeon. "I can't even see through my tears right now. This is the moment we all feared. Silas is broken, Elena is buried alive, and the villains have won. Is this really how it ends? Is the Valeska line truly dead? Please, I need some hope in the comments. Give me a stay strong for Elena and Silas. We need to send them some energy. If you're still with us in this darkest hour, make sure you've hit subscribe. You cannot walk away now, not when everything is on the line. Can Elena find a way to use her hidden lineage before the light leaves the world forever? In the pitch black of the cell, Elena's hand closed around the signet ring so hard the metal bit into her palm. Her blood, the blood of the bridge, the blood of the ancient queens, smeared across the crest. Suddenly, the ring didn't feel cold anymore. It began to pulse. A faint, rhythmic golden light started to seep through her fingers. "I am not just a heartbeat," Elena whispered, her voice growing steady in the dark. "I am the fire." But as the light grew, she heard something else. A scratching at the door. Not Julian. Not Clara. Something hungrier. Malachi had released the starved ones, vampires who had lost their minds to the hunger, into the lower levels to finish what the darkness started. The handle of the door began to rattle. Elena backed away, her heart hammering. She was alone, she was mortal, and the monsters were through the door. This was it. The absolute bottom. The darkest hour had arrived, and the only thing Elena Crane had left was a glowing ring and a name she didn't yet know how to carry. The iron door of the cell didn't just open. It was shredded. The starved ones burst through, creatures that were more bone and madness than men, their eyes glowing with a feral white light. Elena backed into the furthest corner, her hand pressed against the jagged stone wall. The golden light from the signet ring was now a blinding sun in the palm of her hand, reacting to her terror, but she didn't know how to wield it. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice echoing in the cramped space. The lead creature lunged, its claws extended like obsidian needles. But as it entered the radius of the golden glow, it didn't bite. It shrieked. The light didn't just illuminate the darkness. It burned the corruption out of the air. The creature collapsed, its form dissolving into harmless mist the moment it touched the aura of Elena's blood. Elena looked at her hand. The ring wasn't just a symbol, it was a conduit. The consort must also hold the seal of the living, her mother's notes had said. She realized then that she didn't need the physical silver seal Julian had stolen. The seal was in her. Her lineage was the lock and her courage was the key. "I am the fire," she repeated, her voice no longer a whisper. She stepped out of the corner, the golden light expanding until the entire cell was bathed in the warmth of a summer afternoon. The remaining starved ones fled into the shadows, hissing in agony at the purity of the radiance. In the great hall, Malachi felt the shift. The unnatural twilight he had created began to flicker. He turned his head, his black eyes narrowing. What is this? The girl should be dead. Silas, barely conscious and pinned by the obsidian spikes, felt it too. The fraying tether between his soul and Elena's suddenly snapped taut, surging with an influx of vitality that tasted like mountain air and life itself. His eyes snapped open, the silver-white fire returning with a vengeance. She's coming for you, Malachi, Silas rasped, a bloody smile stretching across his face. Suddenly, the floor of the great hall vibrated. A golden shockwave tore through the stone, radiating from the direction of the dungeons. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, her silhouette framed by a halo of shimmering gold. She wasn't the trembling villager anymore. She stood with the poise of an ancient queen, her presence demanding the attention of every immortal in the room. Julian. The seal, she commanded. Julian Vance, startled by her sudden transformation, tried to raise the corrupted relic, but the golden ribbons of light flowing from Elena's ring reached out like living vines. They wrapped around the seal, stripping away the green corruption and restoring its brilliant sunlight glow. The relic flew from Julian's hand, sailing through the air until it clicked perfectly onto the face of Elena's signet ring. The fusion was instantaneous. A pillar of pure white light erupted from Elena, hitting the ceiling and shattering the spell that held the great eclipse in place. Above the estate, the moon began to slide away from the sun, and the first true rays of daylight pierced the windows of the hall. No! Malachi screamed, his shadow magic evaporating in the dawn. Elena didn't stop. She sprinted toward the dais, the light from the seal carving a path through the obsidian spikes. As she reached Silas, she didn't hesitate. She took his face in her hands, her golden light bleeding into his silver shadows. I choose you, Silas, she whispered, her voice a vow that resonated through the fabric of time. Not as a battery. Not as a prize. But as my equal. She tilted her head, exposing the pulsing vein of her neck, the ultimate act of trust and power. Take the bite. Not to consume me but to bind us. End this darkness. I have goosebumps on my goosebumps. Elena just stepped into her power and saved the world. She's offering him the eternal bite, the very thing she feared, but now on her own terms. This is the ultimate turning point. Do you think Silas will take it? Can they survive the fusion of their powers? I need to see those yes or no votes in the comments right now. And if you aren't cheering at your screen, check your pulse. Hit that subscribe button because the climax is literally seconds away. Let's go. Silas looked at her, his expression one of profound reverence and love. The obsidian cage crumbled into dust around him. He rose, his strength restored by her proximity, his royal aura magnifying 100-fold. Elena, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You are the dawn I never thought I'd see again. He didn't lung like a predator. He leaned in with the tenderness of a lover, his fangs grazing her skin with a spark of electric heat. As the sun broke fully over the horizon, Silas Valeska gave the eternal bite, not to a victim but to a queen. The room exploded in a flash of gold and silver. The turning point was over. The counterattack had begun. The air in the great hall didn't just vibrate, it shattered. As Silas's fangs pierced Elena's skin, a shockwave of gold and silver energy rippled outward, throwing Julian Vance and the remaining council members against the stone walls. The eternal bite was no longer a myth. It was a supernova. Elena didn't feel pain. She felt a sudden roaring expansion of her consciousness. She could feel the ancient stone of the castle, the racing hearts of the terrified nobles, and the cold, hollow void where Malachi's soul should be. Silas's power, 5 centuries of steel and shadow, poured into her, while her own fire of the living anchored him, tempering his predatory hunger into a focused divine light. They pulled apart, their eyes glowing with a unified radiance. They weren't two beings anymore. They were a singular force of nature. The era of the shadow is over, Malachi, Silas said, his voice echoing with a dual-tonal resonance, his own deep baritone layered with Elena's clear, sharp authority. Malachi hissed, his face contorting into a mask of pure abyssal rage. He realized the seal of the living, now fused to Elena's ring, was drawing the light of the returning sun and funneling it directly into the Valeska bloodline. I am the end of all things. I am the hunger that outlives the stars. With a shriek that cracked the stained glass windows, Malachi transformed. He didn't just shift, he dissolved into a massive swirling cyclone of sentient shadow, filled with the screaming faces of those he had consumed. The cyclone tore across the hall, shredding the tapestries and grinding the marble floor to dust. "Stand behind me," Silas commanded, but Elena stepped forward, her hand locked in his. "No," she said, the seal on her hand pulsing like a rhythmic sun. "We face him together." They raised their joined hands. A beam of concentrated, iridescent light, the fusion of mortal life and immortal strength, shot forward. It struck the heart of Malachi's shadow storm. The collision was deafening. The hall was filled with a blinding, flickering strobe of white and black as the two forces fought for dominance. Julian Vance, seeing his opportunity to escape, lunged for the side exit, but Clara Thorne stepped from the wreckage of the balcony. She held a crossbow loaded with a bolt of pure mountain ash. "The game is over, Julian," she said firmly. With a single shot she pinned his silk cloak to the wall, trapping the traitor where he stood. In the center of the hall, Malachi's shadow storm was beginning to fray. The golden light of the seal was eating through the darkness, exposing the gaunt, pathetic core of the ancient vampire. "You think love is a weapon?" Malachi's voice rasped from within the light. "It is a tether. It makes you weak. It makes you mortal. It makes us eternal," Elena countered. With a final, monumental surge of will, Elena and Silas poured everything they had into the seal. The light turned a brilliant, blinding violet. It didn't just strike Malachi, it enveloped him. The screams of the shadow storm turned into a single high-pitched note of purification. In a massive, silent explosion of white light, the shadow storm vanished. Malachi was gone, reduced to a pile of fine gray ash that scattered in the morning breeze. The great hall fell silent. The sun, now fully clear of the eclipse, poured through the shattered windows, bathing the room in a warmth it hadn't known for centuries. The surviving nobles stood in awe, many dropping to their knees, not in fear but in genuine recognition of a power that was just and balanced. Silas turned to Elena, his face illuminated by the true dawn. The silver fire in his eyes had softened into a look of profound, heroic peace. He reached out, his thumb gently wiping a stray drop of blood from the mark on her neck. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was a shimmering, golden brand, the mark of the Eternal Queen. "We did it," he whispered, his voice trembling with a relief he hadn't felt in 500 years. "We began it," Elena corrected, a tired but triumphant smile breaking across her face. The most surprising twist wasn't that the human girl became a queen, or that the vampire king found his heart. It was that in the moment of their greatest triumph, they realized the throne didn't matter. The power didn't matter. All that mattered was the heartbeat they now shared across the divide of life and death. "I'm literally out of breath. Did you see that?" The way they combined their powers to take down Malachi was the most epic thing I have ever seen. The darkness is gone, the traitors are caught, and Silas and Elena have survived the impossible. I need a "Long Live the Queen" in the comments right now. Let's show Elena some love for saving the world. And if you want to see how this incredible journey ends and what the future holds for the Valeska estate, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This has been an emotional ride and we're about to pull into the station for the final conclusion. Don't go anywhere. Silas looked out over his kingdom, then back at the woman who had redefined it. Justice had been delivered, the mystery of the cranes had been solved, and the most dangerous night in history had ended in a morning of hope. But as the dust settled, Elena felt a strange sensation, a lingering warmth from the seal. It wasn't fading. It was growing, weaving itself into her very soul. She wasn't just immortal, she was the guardian of the bridge between two worlds. The weeks following the Great Eclipse saw a transformation of the Valeska estate that no one in the Black Mountains thought possible. The heavy, oppressive mists that had guarded the fortress for centuries began to lift, replaced by the clear, sharp air of a new era. The Gothic fortress was no longer a place of dread. It had become a beacon. Silas and Elena stood on the same balcony where their journey had truly begun. The iron railing was no longer cold. It felt warmed by the sun that now regularly graced the valley. Silas wore a simple white linen shirt, the sharp edges of his royal persona softened by the peace that now radiated from him. Beside him, Elena looked radiant, the golden mark on her neck shimmering like a piece of fine jewelry. "The council has ratified the new laws," Silas said, looking out over the village below, where humans and vampires were beginning to trade and interact without the shadow of fear. "The bridge isn't just a legend anymore, Elena. It's a constitution." "My mother would have loved this," Elena whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. They had converted the West Tower into a sanctuary and library, a place where the history of both their lineages was preserved. The mystery of Rose Crane had been fully resolved. She hadn't been a victim, but the architect of a peace that was finally being realized. Clara Thorne had been appointed as the High Emissary, ensuring that the voices of the Daywalkers and the human population were always heard at the royal table. Julian Vance and Evelyn Beaumont had been exiled to the outer wastes, stripped of their titles and forced to live among the very people they had once looked down upon, a just and fitting redemption for their treachery. But the greatest change was between the king and his queen. The eternal bite hadn't just bound their souls, it had changed them both. Silas found himself appreciating the fleeting beauty of a sunrise, while Elena felt the steady, calm strength of the centuries flowing through her veins. They had found the perfect balance, the fire of the living and the endurance of the eternal. "Are you happy, Elena?" Silas asked, his voice full of a tenderness that was once buried under obsidian. "I promised you forever, but I never asked if forever was enough." Elena turned to him, taking his hands in hers. The seal of the living on her ring caught the light, casting a warm glow over both of them. "Forever is just the beginning, Silas. With you, every day feels like a new life." He leaned down, kissing her with a passion that had only grown deeper since the battle. There were no more secrets, no more hidden graves, and no more predatory hunger. There was only the undeniable truth of two souls who had crossed the divide of time and nature to find each other. "We have finally reached the end of our journey and my heart is so full." Silas and Elena's story is a testament to the fact that love, when it's real and balanced, can change the world. They didn't just survive, they thrived and brought a new dawn to a world of shadows. I want to thank every single one of you for riding this emotional roller coaster with me. Your theories, your votes, and your energy made this story what it is. If you loved this ending as much as I did, please leave a comment with the word eternal and tell me what your favorite moment was. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. We have so many more incredible, emotional, and addictive stories waiting for you. Hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when the next saga begins. Until next time, stay fearless and keep believing in the power of love. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold, the king and queen of the unbroken line turned back toward their home. The gates were open, the lights were warm, and the future was a long, beautiful road stretching out into eternity. The ancient bite that once promised dangerous consequences had delivered something far more powerful. A satisfying conclusion, a sense of belonging, and a love that would truly last forever.